Welcome back to my series called Biblical Hebrew 101. In this second lecture in the series, we'll go over the Hebrew vowels and syllables. So buckle up and let's go ahead and get started. Hi, this is Chris Date, and welcome to Theapologetics, where every other week I discuss a wide variety of theological issues and show how a properly biblical worldview can help defend the historic Christian faith from its critics. Join me as we think through what we believe and why we believe it, and not something else. Well, hello and welcome back, students. My name is Chris Date, and if you haven't already watched the first lecture in this series, the lecture on the Hebrew alphabet, and if you're not already familiar with the Hebrew alphabet, then I would encourage you to go back and watch the first lecture in this series, because this second lecture in the series assumes that you have a familiarity, a basic working knowledge of the Hebrew consonants in the Hebrew alphabet. Just as by way of reminder, this lecture series is based loosely on the Basics of Biblical Hebrew, 2nd edition by Pratico and Van Pelt. In Lecture 1, we covered the content of Chapter 1, which was on the consonants in the Hebrew alphabet, and in this lecture we will be covering the material in Chapters 2 and 3, which is all about syllabification, or syllables, and vowels. But as I said in the first lecture, my intent is at the beginning of every one of these lectures to get you warmed up, to get you in a headspace ready to learn Biblical Hebrew. So let's go ahead and introduce you to the modern Hebrew way of saying "see you later," and show you the biblical meaning of the word "amen," because that sometimes comes through in our translations as "amen" and not using the underlying meaning. So the modern Hebrew word or expression that you're going to be able to use in conversation, ordinary everyday conversation with modern Hebrew speakers, is lahit ra'ot. Lahit ra'ot. And it's a less formal way of saying goodbye, and it basically means something like "see you later." Literally, this is the infinitive, the reflexive infinitive, meaning to see each other or to meet each other. And you know, if you don't want to actually say goodbye, as if you may not see the person any longer, then this is a nice way to in a less serious way, say goodbye in a way that implies you'll see each other again. So to say "see you later," you say lahit ra'ot. Lahit ra'ot. Now, as far as a biblical word or expression that comes through in our English translations very often as a transliteration rather than as a translation, remember, if you didn't already know this, that whereas translation is to take the meaning of a word in a source language and reproduce that meaning in the destination language, transliteration takes the sound of a word in a source language and reproduces as best as possible the sound made by that word in the destination language. So in the case of "amen," the Hebrew word behind that is "amen," and it even comes through in New Testament Greek as "amen." So you can see how that's a transliteration rather than a translation, because if it were a translation, then what you would be reading is something like "truly" or "verily." And indeed, many translations do translate "amen" in the New Testament as "verily" or "truly," but some don't. And, you know, when we end our prayers, we very often say "amen." So now, if you didn't already, you know what it is that you're saying when you say "amen," and you know what the underlying Greek word is and the underlying Hebrew word behind that under the translation "amen," or the transliteration "amen," when it appears in the New Testament. So hopefully that helps, and with that warm-up out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into the details and rules of vowels and syllables in Biblical Hebrew. So firstly, usually, but not always, the final syllable, the last syllable of a Hebrew word is the one that receives the emphasis. the stress. So, I mean, think about the English word emphasis. We don't typically say emphasis, and we don't typically say emphasis. We say emphasis. So the stress is on the first of the three syllables in the word emphasis. In Hebrew, usually the last syllable, also known as the ultima in grammar, usually it's the last syllable of a Hebrew word that receives the stress. But sometimes it'll be on the second to last, or maybe even third to last. But by and large, last syllable. Now, because there are exceptions to that rule, some grammars and lexicons use the accent mark, in this case, one that looks like a leftward pointed arrow, a leftward pointed caret, to indicate when a different syllable should be stressed. So that accent mark, that little leftward pointed arrow, that little leftward pointed caret, will be above the consonant that begins that syllable. So you'll see that in your vocabulary flashcards and in some other places. Where you won't see that, however, at least not usually, is in Hebrew Bibles. Because instead of using that particular accent mark to indicate where the accent should be, Hebrew Bibles use a system of marks called cantillation signs or cantillation marks. And these indicate which syllables to stress, among other things, to facilitate reading Hebrew in a formal religious setting. Cantillation marks are not usually taught in beginning biblical Hebrew, but I would encourage you to study it independently. And perhaps as part of this series, I will do an optional lecture on cantillation marks. Now, syllables are classified in Hebrew by their proximity to the stress or accent. So the tonic syllable is the one that receives the stress. So in this, in the word that's on your screen right now, sefer, the emphasis is not on the final syllable, which is fer. It's on the previous syllable, se. So in this case, the tonic syllable is se rather than fer, sefer. The pre-tonic syllable precedes the tonic one. It's the one immediately before the tonic syllable. So in the Hebrew word davar, notice the stress is on the last syllable, as it usually is in Hebrew. So the syllable, so var is the tonic syllable, and the pre-tonic syllable is da, the one before the tonic syllable. And then finally, the pro-pre-tonic syllable precedes the pre-tonic syllable. So in devarim, the third to last syllable, the last syllable is the one that is tonic. It's the one that receives the emphasis. The third to last, d in devarim, d in this case is the pro-pre-tonic syllable. So just to make it really clear, let's break out that word devarim, and you can see that the last syllable, rim, is the tonic syllable. Not devarim, not devarim, but devarim. Right? So rim is the tonic syllable. Va, devarim, is the pre-tonic syllable, the one immediately before the tonic syllable. And the first syllable, the d, devarim, is pro-pre-tonic. All right? So when you see the words tonic, pre-tonic, and pro-pre-tonic in your grammar, you'll know which syllables are being referred to there. Hebrew words are composed of one or more syllables. Every syllable begins with exactly one consonant, with the one and only sole exception of the Hebrew word u, meaning and. The word u in this case is one of the vowels that you will learn today, but it's a form of the Hebrew word v, meaning and. And the reason why this is the one exception of a syllable that begins with, in this case, one that doesn't begin with a consonant, is because it does begin with a consonant character. It's just being used as a vowel, and you'll see how this works throughout the course of this lecture. But with the exception of u, meaning and, every Hebrew syllable begins with exactly one consonant. Every syllable has exactly one vowel. And that's usually not the vowel with which the word starts. So U is exactly the one vowel, but usually the consonant that a word begins with, or that a syllable begins with, is not a vowel, but it can be. And then an open syllable ends in its vowel. So in the Hebrew word bara, the first syllable there, ba, is open because you've got the consonant bait, making the b sound, and you've got a vowel called a comets, which is pronounced like ah. So the whole syllable is b, ah, ba, ba. So it doesn't end in a consonant, and that makes the syllable open. A closed syllable ends in another consonant. So in the word eight, the syllable begins with the consonant aleph. It has the vowel tsere in it, and it ends in the consonant tav. So the syllable eight is a closed syllable. Now, obviously, in order to communicate in Hebrew, you're going to need to create these syllables. So let's first talk about how an open syllable is created, and we're going to need vowels. So let's talk about vowels. Hebrew, as I explained in Lecture 1, was originally written with consonants only. Vowel sounds were supplied by the reader while reading. And this may sound like it's a little bit difficult to do, a little bit unusual, but it's actually not all that difficult to do for native speakers of a language. So for example, if you see the string of consonants on the left there, LV, TH, LRD, YR, GD, you're typically going to be able to recognize that as love the Lord your God. So it's not all that difficult. And you could take just about any sentence in English, if you're a native English speaker, remove the vowels, and you'll be able to see how easy it is to read. So it's not something we're familiar with, accustomed to, but it is nevertheless not that difficult to do. And modern Hebrew speakers are used to reading Hebrew text that is written with only the consonants. That's how most Hebrew writing is done today, without without any vowel markings. Now, markings that were standardized around 1000 AD or CE are sometimes added to the consonants in order to aid in pronunciation. This is a slide that I showed in Lecture 1. These markings are primarily added underneath the consonants, but sometimes also above and inside them. These markings, by the way, are what we're going to be learning in today's lecture. The way these work is that in any given syllable, after the consonant is pronounced, then any vowel marking it is pronounced immediately after the consonant is pronounced. So this is the word Elohim, and the consonants are Aleph, Lamed, He, Yod, and Mem. And then I've tried to break apart those consonants and their vowels. So to the left of the first consonant, which is Aleph, is a dotted circle representing a letter, a consonant, whatever letter it might be. And in this case, it's Aleph. But under that consonant is this vowel, which you will learn today. Then there's the next consonant, Lamed, and then the next vowel, Holem, and the next consonant, and so forth. So you pronounce the consonant first. In the case of Aleph, it's a glottal stop, as you learned in Lecture 1. And then you say the vowel. In this case, it's a hurried E sound, not long E, but short E, so eh. And so the first syllable here is eh. It's got the glottal stop, the sound, and then it's got the eh sound. So eh. And then the consonant Lamed is pronounced, l. And then the vowel Holem is pronounced, o. Elo. And then, of course, it goes on to say Elohim. So that's how this works. You've got the consonants, and then the vowel markings around them, and you pronounce it consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, etc. Now, this marking system is called pointing, at least in many of your Hebrew grammars written for English speakers. In Hebrew, they call it nikud, which means a dotting or a pointing. So if you come upon the word nikud, you know what it's referring to. It's referring to this standardized system of pointing for marking vowels and other sounds around consonants. The markings themselves that comprise this system, each individual marking, these are called nikudot, which is the plural of the word nikuda, which means a dot or a point. So the system is nikud. The individual markings are nikudot, points or dots. This system was developed by the Masoretes from the latter half of the first millennium AD, somewhere between 600 and 1000 CE. It was finalized by that point. Their pointed text, the text they produced by adding the nikudot around the consonants, the resulting text that they produced is called the Masoretic text. And original unpointed text is called consonantal text, meaning comprised only of consonants. So be on the lookout throughout your biblical studies for these words. Pointing, the Hebrew pointing system, which is called nikud. The individual marks themselves called nikudot, each individual of which is called nikuda. This system was standardized by the Masoretes. Their pointed text is called the Masoretic text, and unpointed original text is called consonantal text. Originally, there were three classes of vowels, A class, I class, and U class. They are named today after those English vowels. Obviously, in original Hebrew, they wouldn't have called it A class, but that's how we're categorizing today the vowel sounds, is by the corresponding English vowel sounds. Some grammars use this classification and will include E and O sounds in those three categories that I just mentioned. So they will include the E sounds in the I class and the O sounds in the U class. Other grammars, including the Basics of Biblical Hebrew, classify E and O sounds in separate classes, the E class and O class, respectively. So depending upon which grammar you're using, which resources you're reading, you're going to either encounter three classes or five. Basics of Biblical Hebrew is using the 5-class system, A, E, I, O, and U. But just know that in some resources you will find them referring to just 3 classes, A, I, and U, in which case they will include the E sounds in the I class and the O sounds in the U class. All right, so that is the details around vowels, which will allow us to create open syllables, but now we're going to need to create closed syllables, right? If we just put another consonant with a vowel under it, after a first syllable, that's going to produce a second syllable, and the first one will be open. So we need to figure out how to close a syllable. So how do we do that? Well, one way is with using a marking called a shewa, or shava. Remember, the vav in modern Hebrew is pronounced as a V rather than a W, and so modern Hebrew speakers will call this a shava. You will see it transliterated with a W, though. The shava is typically taught alongside vowels, but importantly, it's not considered a vowel, usually. So this is not something that falls within those 5 or 3 classes of vowels. Rather, the shava represents something like the absence of a vowel. Although, and you will learn the rules around this, it is sometimes vocalized. Sometimes. Other times it's silent. Now, you will also encounter in your grammar what it's calling reduced vowels. This is how some other grammars refer to them as well. But other grammars refer to these as composite shavas, because as you will see, they combine a vowel marking with a shava to make a composite shava vowel. And in these reduced vowels or composite shavas, the name of the composite shava or reduced vowel is the name of the vowel preceded with the word chataf, meaning hurried. So in your grammar, you're just told this is called the chataf segol, the chataf komets, whatever, and now you know why it's called that and how that can help you to remember the sound produced by these composite shavas. They're like hurried versions of the vowels that they combine with the shava. Now, when the shava is silent, it's going to close a syllable. And so this is one way to create closed syllables. If you have a consonant with a vowel under it, and then you have another consonant with a shewa under it, which again represents the absence of a vowel, you know you've got a closed syllable. So going back to the example we saw earlier, the word 8, you've got the consonant aleph, the vowel tsere, and the consonant tav, and then under the tav, if it were not at the end of a word, if it were in the middle of a word, there would be a shewa under it, and so the whole syllable would be 8. It ends in a consonant, making it closed. When it is vocalized, though, it is a syllable all of its own, as you will learn. But when it's silent, that's one way to create closed syllables. The other way is using something that I introduced you to in the first lecture, the Dagesh. You'll recall that there are two kinds of Dagesh, which means emphasis. There's the Dagesh Kal, or Dagesh Lena, which means weak emphasis. And you'll recall that Dagesh changes the softer sound of certain consonants that we're calling Begadkefat consonants to a more hard sound, so like from fe to pe. All right. This lecture, however, introduces the second of the two kinds of Dagesh, the Dagesh forte, or Dagesh chazak. This means strong Dagesh. Remember, it's not forte. This isn't Italian. This isn't a musical instruction. This is Latin from fortis, forta, meaning great or strong. Dagesh chazak is how they would say it in Hebrew. The Dagesh forte cannot occur with gutturals, and that includes reish. Remember in Lecture 1 I explained that reish is not technically a guttural, but does often act like one, and that includes its inability to take a Dagesh forte. And what the Dagesh forte or Dagesh chazak does is it doubles the value of a consonant. And it affects Begadkefat consonants the same way that a Dagesh Lena does. But so here's an example. In the Hebrew word ata, this means you to a masculine recipient of the one you're speaking to, ata. That Dagesh in the tav is a Dagesh forte, and you'll learn about how to tell the difference in a moment. So what that means is that this is actually two syllables, and the tav is actually doubled. So the first syllable is aleph, and then a vowel, and then tav, at. Notice that shewa under the tav is silent, at. And then a second syllable begins with the second of the doubled tavs. And then it has a vowel and hey, ta. So this is two syllables, at, ta, but you don't separate them. So it's at, ta. And this applies to transliteration as well. So this wouldn't be ATA. This would be well, aleph is transliterated using that rightward pointed apostrophe-like symbol, remember from Lecture 1. And then there's the vowel that is transliterated A. And then that doubled tav, because it's doubled with that Dagesh forte, it is it is transliterated twice, T and T. And then finally the final vowel. So, and again, this is to represent that there are two syllables here. The first closed syllable, at, and the second open syllable, ta. Now, because Begadkefat consonants can take a Dagesh Lena, when you encounter a Begadkefat consonant with a Dagesh in it, it's not always going to be immediately clear whether it's a Dagesh Lena, in which case all it does is harden the soft sound and make it harder. Or if it's a Dagesh forte, in which case it not only does that, but also doubles the consonant. So the question is, how do we tell the difference? Well, if it is preceded by a vowel sound, then it's a Dagesh forte. So in the case of that word we looked at a moment ago, ata, there is no consonant sound immediately preceding the tav that has the Dagesh in it. You've got an open syllable, aleph, and then a vowel sound. So because it ends in a vowel sound, the previous character ends in a vowel sound, we know that the Dagesh in the tav is a Dagesh forte and doubles it. But if it's following a consonant sound, then it's a Dagesh Lena. So the word here is malka, malka. And you'll notice the Shewa, the two vertical dots, and you'll learn about that in this lecture, under the lamed there, the second character. That's an indication that you have two syllables here, the first of which is closed, mal. So the kaf with the dagesh in it is immediately following a consonant sound, that ul sound. It's not following a vowel sound. And so therefore we know that this is a dagesh lena, not a dagesh forta. So this isn't M-A-L-K-K-A, it's M-A-L-K-A. And then it's worth observing that there is no dagesh at the beginning of a word that follows a word ending in a vowel. So in the Hebrew here, in this bullet point, it's lifnei chohein, and the previous word lifnei, and this means, by the way, in the presence of a priest or in the face of a priest. Lifnei ends in a vowel sound, and so the kaf, which is a Begadkefat consonant, at the beginning of the word chohein, does not have a dagesh in it. All right? All right, now, each vowel... Okay, so we've now covered vowels, and we've covered how you will create... So vowels are necessary to create open syllables, and then we need to know, we've covered how to create closed ones. Let's talk a little bit more about these vowels before we dive into the actual individual nekudot that we're going to learn. Each vowel class includes both short and long vowels. As in English, short and long vowels are often pronounced differently, but not for different durations. So take in English the long A versus the short A. The short and long don't necessarily refer to how long it's pronounced. The short A is a, the long A is a, but they'll be pronounced in the same, roughly the same duration of time. The short and the long refer to how the sounds change. Short a, long a. The same is true of Hebrew. Short and long don't really refer to how long the vowel is pronounced. It refers to what sound is produced. What your grammar calls vowel letters are often known as matris lectionis, which means mothers of reading. And an individual mother of reading is called a mater lectionis. And a mater lectionis is a consonant that represents a continuation of the preceding vowel, or represents a vowel. And you'll learn this as we go through the nekudot. When a word is supposed to have one of these vowel letters or one of these maters, but is written without it, this is what's called defective writing or defective spelling. When a word is supposed to have a mater or a vowel letter and is written with it, that's called full writing or full spelling. So when you encounter the phrases defective writing or spelling and full writing or spelling, what it's referring to is either the presence or lack of an expected vowel letter or mater lectionis. But importantly, this full and defective spelling difference makes no difference when it comes to meaning or pronunciation. It's pronounced and it means the same thing. It's pronounced the same and it means the same thing whether it is full or defectively written. And these maters lectionis, or vowel letters, shouldn't be confused with diphthongs, although they are easy to confuse with diphthongs. And so I'm going to teach you them individually so you can see the difference. A Hebrew diphthong is a combination of vowels and consonants that produces multiple sounds, multiple vowel sounds, or in some cases consonant sounds, as you'll see, in a single syllable. So consider comparable diphthongs in English. The OY in the word boy. Boy is a single syllable, but the O and the Y make two different vowel sounds that converge in a single syllable, oi. Similarly, the O and W in the English word town produce a single syllable comprised of two sounds, sort of, ah and then oo, ow, right? So town is a single syllable, but there are two vowel sounds in it, something like an O and something like a W, so ow. Hebrew diphthongs act similarly, and we're going to go through them separately from the vowels so that you can keep them distinct in your mind. When an aleph, the first consonant in the Hebrew alphabet, when an aleph occurs without a vowel, and therefore closes a syllable, it is silent, but it does not take a silent shava. Remember, the shava marks the absence of a vowel. And what this is saying is that sometimes an aleph closes a syllable, but doesn't, and is silent, but doesn't take a silent shava. This is called the quiescent aleph, and it's transliterated in parentheses. So normally the aleph is simply transliterated using that rightward pointing apostrophe-like symbol. When the aleph is quiescent, it is transliterated, that symbol is placed in parentheses. So here's an example. This is the very first word of the Bible, Bereshit. Bereshit. So 3 syllables. So here I'm breaking out those syllables. There's the B, which is a consonant and a vocal shava. Then there's so that was the pro-pretonic syllable, just to recall a slide from earlier. The pretonic, in this case, second syllable is the syllable re, and the tonic or final syllable is sheet. B, re, sheet. And that middle syllable, re, it ends in an aleph, which is a consonant, and therefore closes the syllable, but it is silent, and there is no shava under it. So this is the quiescent aleph. In transliteration, you transliterate the 3 syllables this way. The B representing the bait with the dagesh in it, the superscript E, which as you'll see shortly can be transliterated in other ways, those 2 characters represent the first syllable B. The second syllable is R representing the resh, an E with a line over it representing the tere, and then because the aleph is quiescent, it's not pronounced, and it closes the syllable, we're going to put that rightward pointed apostrophe symbol between parentheses. And then the third syllable sheet is the S with a downward pointed caret to represent the sheen, an I with an upward pointed caret representing the chirek, and the yod that follows after it, for reasons you'll learn soon. That's one of these maters lectiones, or vowel letters. And then finally the tav with a line under it, because the tav doesn't have a dagesh. So this is the quiescent aleph. Just remember, it closes a syllable but isn't pronounced. All right, so with all those details and rules out of the way, let's dive into the individual nekudot, or dots. And we'll begin with the symbol that is often treated as a vowel, but isn't actually a vowel, the shava. As you can see, the shava is 2 dots in a vertical line under a consonant. It is pronounced in a very hurried way when it's vocalized, like the A in amuse. Right? We don't say amuse, we say amuse. That's when it's vocal. When it's silent, it's silent. It's not pronounced at all. When it's vocal, it is transliterated. Your grammar and many others use a superscript E, but you will also at times encounter an upside down E, or an E with a little downward swooping symbol over the E. Examples of words that begin with the shava are ma'od, meaning very, right? Ma'od, 2 syllables, ma'od, and mizbeach, meaning altar. So in this case, in the first case, the shava is vocal, ma'od, but in the second case, it's silent, miz, so that's a closed syllable, mizbeach. 2 syllables, mizbeach, meaning altar. Now, how do you tell when a shava is vocal versus silent? Well, the very rough and ready rule is to think that the shava is vocal when it doesn't follow a short vowel. But let's break this down into more specific applications. When it's at the beginning of the word, like the word we just looked at a moment ago, ma'od, it is vocal, right? Because it's not following a short vowel, right? It's at the beginning of a word. When it is the second of 2 shavas in immediate succession, then it's vocal. So in this word, it's kad shecha, and kad ends in a silent shava, and then the next syllable, sh, has a vocal shava, because it's two shavas in immediate succession. The second one is vocal, kad shecha. It is also, the shava is also vocal when it follows a Dagesh forte. So in this case, it's dibaru. And remember, beit is a Begadkefat consonant, which means that Dagesh inside of it could be a Dagesh lena, or it could be a Dagesh forte. We know in this case it's a Dagesh forte because it follows a vowel sound. So the first of the doubled baits closes the first syllable, and the second of the doubled baits has the shava under it. And so that second of the repeated bait is a syllable along with the vocalized shava under it. B. Dib-ba-ru. Dib-ba-ru. Also, if it follows the first of a repeated consonant, and this is really the same thing as the previous rule, except that you can't put a, there's sometimes where you don't have a Dagesh forte in the doubled consonant. It's actually doubled, written twice. And here's an example, hallelu, hallelu, hallelu. The, normally, that lamed, the first lamed, the one that's colored red on your screen, when it's got a shava under it and it follows a vowel sound like it does here, normally we would take that as a silent shava. But it's immediately followed by the same consonant, another lamed. So we know that this is not a silent shava, it's a vocal shava, and it's pronounced ha-l-lu, ha-l-lu, 3 syllables. And then finally, shava is vocal if it's after a long vowel. So the vowel sound in the previous word we looked at, hallelu, that vowel sound ah under the he is a short vowel. Under a long vowel, like a tsere, which you'll learn shortly, the shava is vocalized. So in this case, it's not ye-l-hu, it's ye-l-hu, 3 syllables, ye-l-hu. Now, a very rough and ready rule for determining when a shava is silent is to say that shava is silent when it does follow a short vowel. Again, let's apply this. A shava, when it's the first of 2 in a row, is silent. So this word is yishmaru, and yish is a single syllable. The hirek, the E vowel in yish, is short, so that's one reason we would know that this is a silent shava, but it's also because it immediately precedes another shava, which we know is vocal from the previous slide. So this is yish, ru, 3 syllables. The shava is also silent at the end of a word. So this is the word yaladt, yaladt, yaladt. Notice both shavas in this case are silent. This is not yaladat, it's yaladat. you gotta make the d and the t sounds immediately following one another. So when you have when you have a shava at the end of a word, it is silent. It's also silent after a short, unstressed vowel. So in the word malach, which means messenger or angel, the stressed syllable is the last one, ach. The previous syllable is mal, and the vowel in that mal is short. And so since that syllable is not stressed, the shava is silent. And if it's after a stressed vowel, even if that vowel is long, then the shava is silent. So we saw in the previous slide that usually after long vowels, the shava is vocal. But in this case, because the long vowel is in a stressed syllable, the shava is silent. So this word is lechna, lechna, And notice it's not lechna, it's lechna. And that long vowel sound, a, that tere, as you will learn, is long, but the syllable is stressed, and so therefore the shava under the chaf is silent. Lechna, rather than lechna. All right? So that's the rules around the shava. Let's go on to the first true vowel, which is comets. This is comets. It looks like a little T under the letter. This is the first of the A-class vowels, and that is the order in which I will be going through these vowels, is by class. This is a long A-class vowel, and as I said, the name is comets. Sometimes you'll see it as kamats. This is pronounced like the A in the English word ball, and it is transliterated as an A with a line over it to indicate that it's a long A sound. Words that start with this vowel sound include av, meaning father, which, by the way, is why Avraham's name, Abraham, is what it is. It begins with that word av, meaning father. And another example is navi, meaning prophet. Next vowel is another A-class vowel. In this case, it's a short vowel, and it's simply a little horizontal line under the consonant. This short A-class vowel is named patach, and it also sounds like the A in the English word bal, but in transliteration it does not have a letter over the A, and that indicates that it is a short A sound. But it is not really pronounced differently. It's either way in this case. Examples of Hebrew words that start with this short A-class vowel called patach include bat, meaning daughter. If you've ever heard, for example, of a bat mitzvah, which means it's kind of like the girl's equivalent of a bar mitzvah, that's what's called bat mitzvah, is because bat means daughter. And another example is har, meaning hill or mountain. The next, normally, as we've learned, the vowel sound is made immediately after the consonant that marks it. This patach is in some cases an exception to that rule, and when it's an exception to that rule, it's called a furtive patach. Furtive means stealthy or subtle. When this happens is when it's under a hey with a dot in it, a chet or an ayin at the end of a word. When it's under one of these consonants, the patach is pronounced and transliterated before the consonant rather than after. So we saw an example of this a moment ago, and I'm going to give an example, so I'll wait for that. This furtive patach isn't counted in syllables, and it has no standard transliteration, at least as far as I can tell. I'm seeing places where it's transliterated simply as a, or a in parentheses, or a superscript a. There doesn't appear to be any sort of rigid standard here. An example, a very common example of a word that has the furtive patach is the word ruach, which means spirit or breath. And you'll notice that normally the patach, that little horizontal line under the consonant, it would normally follow the consonant. So you might expect to pronounce this like rucha, but it's not. This is a furtive patach because it's under a chet at the end of a word. And so this is one single syllable, ruach, and it's called furtive or subtle or stealthy because that ah sound just sort of sneaks in there before the final consonant. Ruach, not rucha, but ruach. And then here's another example under an ayin, notea. All right, so this is two syllables, no, tea. And then finally, one more. In this case, the furtive patach is under a hey with a dot in it. And you'll learn what that dot is. This is gavoa. So here we have two syllables, ga, voa. Notice how that ah sound sort of sneaks in there. That's why it's called furtive. All right, next vowel in the A class. This is another long vowel. It's technically a mater lectionis, or what your grammar, if you're following along in Basics of Biblical Hebrew, calls a vowel letter. This is named Comets Hey because it is a comets, which you just learned a moment ago, little t under the consonant, but it's followed by a hey, and that hey is not pronounced. It doesn't make a sound. It just extends that. It continues that ah sound made by the comets. So comets hey, and it's pronounced the same way as the comets and patach both are, as the a in ball. But in transliteration, to distinguish this from an ordinary comets, the a doesn't have a line over it. It has a upward pointed caret, or in some grammars they will transliterate it using the a with a line over it that a comets has. But then they'll put an H in parentheses to indicate that the hey is just a continuation of the comets sound. Examples of words that end in the comets hey include susa, which is the female or feminine version of the word meaning horse, so this means mare, and Torah, meaning law or instruction. And just note that the hey mater, any mater or vowel letter that ends in a hey, it only occurs at the ends of words. Now, I mentioned a moment ago we would learn about the dot in a hey at the end of a word. When a hey at the end of a word has that dot in it, that dot is called a mapik, which it means a bringing out, causing to reveal something, causing something to stand out. When the hey at the end of a word could be either a mater, if it's a vowel letter, if it continues the vowel sound under the previous consonant, or it could be an actual consonant to be pronounced. So in order to indicate that the hey at the end of a word is a consonant rather than a mater or a vowel letter, a dot indistinguishable from a dagesh, but instead called a mapik, is placed inside of that hey. So if you see at the end of a word a hey that has a dot in it, that is not a dagesh, it's a mapik, and it's telling you that is not a vowel letter, that is a pronounced consonant, a pronounced hey. So here, for example, is the word susa, not susa, but you're not even going to notice a difference, but susa, susa. I'm trying to pronounce that H sound at the end. But even if you can't distinguish the sound, that H is still not a vowel letter. So this is, in transliteration, an A with a line over it representing the comets, followed by an H representing the consonant. Whereas if that did not have the mapik in it, it would be susa, and the A would be transliterated with a upward pointed caret, or the H would be in parentheses. All right. Another vowel in the A class is the Composite Shewa, or reduced A class vowel, called the Chataf Patach. Remember, Chataf means hurried, and this is called a Composite Shewa because you're combining those two, the two dots in a vertical line called a Shewa with the Patach, the short A class vowel. And so this is sort of a hurried, that's what chataf means, a hurried version of that vowel sound. So it's pronounced like the A in amuse, again, which is the same sound that a normal Shewa normally makes. So you're not going to notice a difference in the sound there. But this is pronounced like the A in amuse, and it's transliterated with an A that has a little downward half bowl, a little half bowl under it, or above it. Examples of words that have this vowel in it are asher. Right, if that were an ordinary patach, it would be asher, but it's hurried. It's chataf. It's hurried, so it's asher. And another example is ma'aseh. That, remember, the ayin makes a glottal stop, so this isn't ma'aseh, it's ma'aseh. And if that were an ordinary patach, it would be ma'aseh, but because it's a chataf or hurried patach, it's ma'aseh. See how fast? Hurried, I'm pronouncing that ah sound, and that word means deed. Okay, so this is the Chataf Patach, the Composite Shewa in the A class. Now, I've just introduced you to the Composite Shewa, so let's talk about it a little bit more. The gutturals, including reish, cannot take a vocal Shewa, although they can sometimes take a silent one. Because they cannot take a vocal Shewa, then when a Shewa would normally be expected under one of these gutturals therefore take a composite Shewa. But it's important to recognize that other consonants sometimes take the composite shewa as well. So even though this is largely about putting a shewa under a guttural, which normally can't take it, nevertheless, you will sometimes see composite shewas under consonants that are not gutturals. So here's an example of a composite shewa under Elohim. The aleph at the beginning of that word cannot take a vocal shewa. So instead of putting a vocal shewa under it, it's got a composite shewa under it, which you'll learn shortly. Elohim. And notice how it's hurried. It's not Elohim, it's Elohim. All right. Now let's move on to the E class of vowels, beginning with the long E class vowel called tsere. The shewa, recall, is a vertical line of 2 dots. The tsere is a horizontal line of 2 dots under the consonant. Tsere. It is pronounced like the E in they, although in hurried, normal, everyday speech, sometimes it's indistinguishable from just an ordinary eh sound. But you should get into the habit, of, at least initially as you're learning, to pronounce it like a, tsere. It's transliterated using the English letter E with a line over it to indicate that it's a long E sound. And examples of words that begin with this vowel sound are ale, meaning God, and bane, meaning son. The short E class vowel is this one. It's kind of like the tsere in that it's a horizontal line of dots, but there's a 3rd dot under it. So it's a little triangle of dots under a consonant. And this is called segol. And it's pronounced like the E in the word better. And it is transliterated using the English letter E without a line over it, because this is the short E, not the long E. Examples of Hebrew words that begin with this sound include Eved, meaning slave, and Moshe, meaning Moses. That eh sound in Moshe is a segol. Next up is the hey mater, or vowel letter in this class of vowels that ends in a hey. Specifically, the one that follows a tsere. All right, so this is the tsere hey. This is a long vowel. It's one of these mater lectionis letters, or vowel letters. It's pronounced, remember, the maters just they continue the previous vowel sound. So this is pronounced the same way as an ordinary tsere, like the E in they, but it's transliterated either with an E that has a little upward pointed caret over it, or the tsere transliteration, the E with a line over it, followed by an H in parentheses. The word aye, has that tsere hey vowel at the end of it, and that means where. And again, just as a reminder, hey maters cannot occur anywhere but at the ends of words. The short E class vowel also has a hey mater. This is segol hey. Again, pronounced just like an ordinary segol. The E is in better, but it's transliterated either with an E with an upward pointed caret over it, or an E with an H in parentheses after it. Now notice the more typical transliteration here, an E with a caret over it, is identical to a tsere hey. And there are a few cases like this where in certain transliterations you won't be able to tell the difference between a tsere hey and a segol hey. But thankfully those are few and far between, so you shouldn't encounter that problem too much. But just be aware that if you're looking at a transliteration with an E and a caret over it, you will have to figure out if it's a tsere hey or a segol hey. The word ishe is an example of a word that has one of these maters in it. It means offering by fire, and it ends in a segol hey. And again, just as a reminder, the hey mater occurs only at the ends of words. Now, the hey mater is not the only mater that E-class vowels can take. They can also take a yod mater, a vowel letter comprised of a yod. So this is the tsere yod, and again, maters just continue the sound of the vowel that precedes them. So this is pronounced like an ordinary tsere, the E in the word they, and this one is always translated as an E with a little caret pointed over it. Examples of words that include this are reach, meaning odor, and bane, meaning between. In both cases, you've got the tsere followed by a yod. That is a yod mater. And the yod mater is unchangeable. What I mean by that is in future lectures, you will see that when words change form, sometimes vowels and consonants undergo changes. But if the word in its lexical form has a mater in it, a yod mater, that is unchangeable. No matter what changes the word undergoes in order to accommodate its new form, the yod mater will not change. The exception is when we're dealing with defective spelling. So it's the same word, same pronunciation, same meaning, same everything. It's just missing the mater. And there's another E-class yod mater, which is the segol yod, which again is pronounced like the E in better. Sometimes it is pronounced like the E in they, and by sometimes I just mean depending upon the speaker. There is no rule here. But because that yod sound is associated with an E sound more than just an S sound, a lot of times it is pronounced A, but it's equally fine to pronounce it like the E in better, the sound that the segol normally makes. And again, the transliteration is an E with a caret over it. And so now you're dealing with four maters lectiones that could be transliterated as an E with an upward pointed caret over it. The tsere he, the tsere yod, the segol he, and the segol yod. So that will be something you have to keep an eye open for, as the transliteration will very often be indistinguishable. An example of a word that has this mater in it is yadea, meaning her hands. That segol followed by the yod is the segol yod mater, and again the yod mater is unchangeable. Finally, in the E class is the composite shewa, or reduced vowel, called chataf segol, again meaning hurried segol. This is pronounced virtually the same as the shewa or the chataf patach, kind of like the A in amuse, but this is like the E in metallic. Ever so slightly different than the sound in amuse. This is more like the E sound in metallic. And like the other composite shewas, this is transliterated using the letter that the ordinary vowel is transliterated with, in this case an E, but to indicate that it's a composite shewa, a little half bowl rests upon the E. And an example of a word that starts with this composite shewa is Elohim, meaning God or gods. All right, moving on now to the I class. This is the characteristic vowel in the I class called hirek. And I think that Basics of Biblical Hebrew calls this a short vowel, but in reality it can be short or long. Either way, it can be pronounced either as the I in bitter, or the I in pit, or bin, or the I in pizza. So you will hear people pronounce it I, and you'll hear people pronounce it E. I tend toward the E sound. Sometimes I'll pronounce it fast like I. It is transliterated using the English letter I, or if it's long, it will be transliterated using the English letter I, but instead of a dot, there'll be a line over it. And examples of words that have an I, of the hirek in it, are Isha, meaning wife, and David, meaning David. Now, how do you tell if a hirek is short or long? Generally speaking, hirek is short. So you can assume that it's short unless one of the following is true. Either it's in an open syllable. So this is the word Daniel. And because ni is an open syllable, not a closed one, this is a long hirek. You can also assume it's short unless it's in a stressed syllable. So in David, the stressed syllable is vid, and that's the one that's stressed, and so that makes it long, even though it's a closed syllable. David. And I just noticed there's an error in this transliteration. Those I's should have lines over them because they are long hireks, not short ones. All right. Next I-class vowel is a mater lectionis, or vowel letter, known as hirek yod. This is pronounced like the I in machine, so if you are used to pronouncing the hirek like the I in bitter or pit or tip, this one you need to change it to an E sound like the I in machine. And this is transliterated using the letter I with a upward pointed caret over it, and examples of words that start with this, or that have this mater lectionis in it, include ish, meaning man or husband, and anashim, meaning men. And again, any yod mater is unchangeable except in defective spelling, like we talked about earlier. The next vowel, it moves us to the O class. This is the vowel holum, and it is long. It makes the sound of the O in the English letter roll. Because it's a long O sound, it's transliterated using the letter O with a line over it. And examples of words that have holum in them include Moshe, that first vowel sound O is the holum, and Kohen, that O sound is the holum. Now, you'll notice that the holum, going back there now, is a dot placed on the upper left corner of the above the consonant. But you'll recall, maybe, if you paid attention in Lecture 1, that that is going to easily be confused with the dot over sin and shin. It can sometimes be difficult to tell which is which. If you've got a sin or a shin that is that has a holum or is followed by or follows a holum, it's sometimes going to be easily confused. So what this means is that before a shin, which has a dot on the upper right side of the consonant, the holum often isn't printed, and that dot above and to the right of the shin just sort of subsumes the holum. That dot represents both the distinctive mark of the shin and the holum that precedes it. So in the way you will see this very often spelled is like here on the left side of the equal sign, and on the right sign is what that represents. Yod with a holum, followed by a shin. After a sin, remember the sin has the dot on the upper left corner, the sun sets in the west. After a sin, the holum often isn't printed either, and the holum is just subsumed into the dot over the sin. Or put another way, the dot over the sin acts as the distinctive mark of the sin and as the holum. So just be aware of how sin and shin work around holums. The next vowel in the O class is short. And notice this looks like a little T under the consonant, meaning it's identical to a comets in appearance. We'll talk about that in a moment. So this is the comets chatuf, which is pronounced like the holum, the O in the word roll, and it's transliterated as an O without a line over it, because this is a short vowel, unlike the holum, which is long. And examples of words that have the comets chatuf in it are the words kol, meaning all, and chokhmah, meaning wisdom. Remember, the comets, not the comets chatuf, but the comets makes the ah sound in the word baal. And so you're going to be tempted when you look at these words to pronounce them kal and chachma, but they're not. They're kol and chokhmah. So how do we tell the difference between comets and comets chatuf? Well, again, let me just say it again. Comets is pronounced like A in Baal, and it's known as comets gadol, meaning large comets. And remember, it's the long A sound. Whereas comets chatuf is pronounced like the O in roll, and it's called the comets katan in Hebrew, meaning small comets, because this is the small O sound. And chatuf in comets chatuf means brief or momentary, so it's supposed to be a brief or momentary O sound. And the comets, the one that is in the A class, is way more common than the comets chatuf. So it's not like this is going to trip you up all the time, but it will sometimes. So we need to figure out how to identify a comets chatuf, how to distinguish between a comets and a comets chatuf. So how do we do that? Well, in the vast majority of closed, unaccented syllables, this vowel marking is comets chatuf. So in the word chokhmah, the accented syllable is ma, And therefore, and the unaccented syllable before it, choch, is closed. So the komets under it is a komets chatuf, not just an ordinary komets. Similarly, in the word vayakom, the kom is not accented and it's closed, so that komets is a komets chatuf, not an ordinary komets. In the word kol, it's always komets chatuf. So anytime you see kol, pronounce it kol, not kal. Before a chataf komets, which is that composite shewa we learned in the A class, before that composite shewa, a komets sign is a komets chatuf. So this word is bo ohalim. Sorry, I made a mistake. Also, before a chataf komets, which is a composite shewa that you're going to learn momentarily, you've already learned the A class composite shewa, which is a chatuf patach, not a chataf komets. The chataf komets, which you're about to learn, if it is preceded by the by this little vowel, the vowel that makes a T under the letter, then that T with under the letter is a komets chatuf, not a komets. So this word is bo ohalim, not ba ohalim. And then finally, if there's a little vertical line next to the patach, next to the komets, that line is called a meteg, and it indicates that that komets is a true komets, not a komets chatuf. So this is batim, not botim. So those are how you can identify a komets chatuf. All right, back to O class vowels. This is the mater lectionis, or vowel letter, known as holam he. Remember, vowel letters or maters lectionis only they continue the vowel sound, which in this case is holam, so the holam he is pronounced like the O in roll. It's transliterated using the letter O with an upward pointed caret, or an O with a line over it to indicate it's a long O sound, and then the H after it is put in parentheses. The Hebrew words zo, meaning this, and ko, meaning thus, are both examples of words that have the holam he in it. And again, just by way of reminder, the he mater occurs only at the ends of words. Another mater in the O class of vowels is called holam vav. And this also is pronounced like the O in roll. It is transliterated using an O with an upward pointed caret over it. And words that include the holam vav are yom, meaning day, and Torah, meaning law or instruction. And again, actually this is your first introduction to a vav mater. Well, like the yod mater, the vav mater is unchangeable. It will not change when the word undergoes changes because of form, except for defective spellings. Now, the composite shewa that I mentioned earlier a few minutes ago when we were talking about identifying a komets versus a komets chatuf, the composite shewa I mentioned there is this one here. It's called a chataf komets. This is the O class composite shewa. It's pronounced like the O in commit, transliterated as an O with a half bowl on top of it. And an example of a word that starts with this composite shewa is the word oni, meaning misery. Now finally, the U class. This is the short or long U-class vowel called kibbutz. It's pronounced like the U in the word ruler. When it is short, it's transliterated using the English letter U, and when it's long, it's transliterated using the English letter U with a line over it. Examples of words that have the kibbutz in them are tuval, and amud. Again, how do we distinguish, just like, earlier we talked about how to distinguish a short hirek from a long hirek. And here, likewise, we have to distinguish between a short kibbutz and a long kibbutz. You can assume that a kibbutz is short, as it usually is, unless it is an open syllable, like tuval. Tu is an open syllable, so that kibbutz is short, or sorry, long. And if it is a stressed syllable, like amud. This is two closed syllables, am and mud, because that mem has a dagesh forte in it. And that accented syllable is the second one, mud. And since the kibbutz is in that syllable, it is long. These are the exact same rules as for discerning between a short and long hirek. The next vowel in the U class is another mater, another vav mater to be specific. But unlike the holam vav, this is not named with the name of the vowel followed by the name of the consonant. This has its own name, which is shurek. Shurek. It's pronounced the same way as a kibbutz, like the U in the English word ruler, and it's transliterated using the English letter U with a caret over it. This is a very common vowel. You will see it in words like sus, meaning horse, and madua, meaning why. And like yod maters, the vav mater is unchangeable, except it is sometimes lost in defective spelling. All right, so here, just as a helpful way of categorizing and remembering the different vowels, is a chart that shows each of the 5 classes as columns, and then each row represents long, simple vowels, short, simple vowels, the composite shavas or chataf vowels, and then finally the various maters or vowel letters in those classes. So this, you can print this out or capture it somewhere and go through it to help you remember. You can use this as a reference or whatever. Now let's move on to diphthongs. Remember, diphthongs are easily confused with maters, with vowel letters. And the reason is because they combine vowel signs with consonants. But these are not maters. These are not vowel letters. These are diphthongs, meaning they combine 2 sounds into a single syllable. So let's go through these. And these do not have names. I'm only showing you these so that you know how to pronounce them. This patach, followed by a yod, makes the sound Y, the sound of the letter Y in the word fly. So for example, chai means living and chayim means life. Now, in the middle of a word, this is not a diphthong unless the yod has a dagesh or shava. And so in the word chayom, that dagesh in the yod is a dagesh forte, which means this is 2 syllables, chai and yom. And so that first syllable, chai, does feature this diphthong. But in the word mayim, the yod does not have a dagesh in it or a shava under it, and so that yod is the consonant that begins the second syllable. It's not a diphthong. It's ma-yim. Okay? Next diphthong is a kametz followed by a yod, but this is pronounced the same way. The Y is the Y in the word fly. So Sinai is Sinai, and Laila is night, and both of those have the diphthong I, kametz followed by a yod. And again, this is not a diphthong in the middle of a word unless the yod has a dagesh or shava in it. Next diphthong is a holam vav followed by a yod. This diphthong is pronounced oi, like in the English word boy. It features in the Hebrew word goy, meaning nation, the plural of which is goyim and means Gentiles. And again, this is not a diphthong in the middle of a word unless the yod has a dagesh or a shava. Next diphthong is shurek, followed by yod. And this makes the sound we, like in the English word sweet. We. And you can see why, right? It's a shurek, which is the u sound, followed by the yod sound. So ui, but in a single syllable, we. So in the Hebrew word asui, that's ending there in that ui diphthong. And again, like the others we looked at, this is not a diphthong if it's in the middle of a word unless the yod has a dagesh or a shava. Next diphthong is a kametz, followed by a yod, followed by a vav. Now, this is going to be pronounced differently depending upon how you've chosen to pronounce the vav. If you take the older biblical studies way of pronouncing it like the letter W, then you would pronounce this diphthong as ow, like cow. But if you pronounce the vav like modern Hebrew speakers do, like the letter V, then this is going to be pronounced av, like the word, like in the word lava. So the Hebrew words elav and yadav, or to use the other pronunciation, elau and yadao, both of those words end in this diphthong. And this is not a diphthong in the middle of a word unless that vav has a shava. So in the word shigayon, that vav does not have a shava under it, so you know that's not a diphthong. That vav is actually the holam vav in that final syllable. And then one last diphthong is hirek yod vav. Again, this is pronounced differently depending upon how you've chosen to pronounce your vavs. If you pronounce the vav like a W, then this is ew, like the word feud. But if you pronounce the vav like a V sound, like modern Hebrew speakers do, then this is more like the IEV in the English word grieve. So natativ and befin are both words that have this, sorry, not befin, befiv, are words that end in this diphthong. And again, this is not a diphthong in the middle of a word unless the vav has a shava. Okay? So those are the diphthongs. Now let's go through the vocabulary that your textbook asks you to learn in this lesson. We're going to go through these vocabulary words in the same order in which they're presented at the end of Chapter 3 in Basics of Biblical Hebrew, which is alphabetical order, or alphabetical order. Beginning with Adam. Adam. This word means human, not man specifically, but human, or humanity, or humankind in general, or to the first man, Adam. So this is Adam. Next up is Eretz. Eretz. And this word means land or earth or ground, and it's feminine. And the reason why this is marked here in your on the slide as feminine and why it's listed as such in your grammar is because, as you will learn in next lecture, feminine nouns typically have a recognizable ending, but this one does not. And so this is marked as feminine here just to indicate that this is not a word that you would recognize as feminine purely by its ending. If it is unrecognizable, if it has no recognizable ending because it's masculine, as you will learn, most masculine nouns have no recognizable ending, then it will just, there won't be anything listed. There won't be masculine or feminine listed. It'll just be, you'll know it's masculine. If it has a recognizable feminine ending, then likewise it won't be listed as feminine here on the slide. But because this word does not have the typical feminine ending, it is marked, I've got it marked as feminine here. So, Eretz. Your next vocabulary word is one you've seen a few times throughout lectures 1 and 2, Elohim. Elohim, which is the plural form of the word El, which means God, and so this is God, God with a big G, or God's plural. Very often the word God, when referring to the Yahweh of the Old Testament, the God, the Israel's God of the Old Testament, when it refers to that God, it's this plural form, Elohim, but it's really referring to a single God, the God of the Old Testament. And there are debates around whether that's an indication that the plurality, the Trinitarian nature of God was recognized in the Old Testament. My position is that is not why God is referred to as Elohim, but that is the subject of a different topic. So this word is Elohim. It very often refers to the one God of Israel, sometimes refers to many false gods, plural. Next word is Av. You have heard this word in lectures 1 and 2, or 1 or both, and it is the word meaning father or ancestor. Next up is El. This is the singular word for God, and sometimes the one God of Israel is referred to as El, but often it's also the word used to refer to other false gods. Bain. Bain. This is the word meaning son or descendant, so it's kind of like the opposite of Av. There is another word that is pronounced identically, Bain, that is spelled a little bit differently. You will want to make sure you do not confuse this one for that one. That other one has a vowel letter in between the bait and the noon. This one does not. So if it's just bait noon, you know it's Bain, meaning son. Next up is Bayit. Bayit. This means house or household. As I mentioned in the previous lecture, I think it was, the name of the city Bethlehem is Beit Lechem, and Beit is a form of this word Bayit. Beit Lechem means house of bread. So Bayit is house or household. Davar. Davar is word or matter, like affair, like, your affairs, get your affairs in order, means get your things in order, right? And so that is what davar means, or just thing. Davar. Next up is yom. Yom, which means day. And importantly, this day in the Old Testament does not necessarily refer to a 24-hour day. It can refer to one's past, like in my day, blah, 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 blah. Or it can refer to the day when such and such, blah, blah, right? You know, it's referring to a period of time that may extend much longer than a 24-hour period of time. You should not assume when you see this word that it's necessarily 24 hours, although that will be very often what it refers to. Yom. Next up is Yisrael. Yisrael. And that is the name Israel, which means he strives with God, or God strives. It's for that reason that God calls Jacob Yisrael, because he strove with God. All right? Yisrael is Israel. Yerushalayim. Sorry, Yerushalayim. I had to put the stress on the right syllable. Yerushalayim. This is the name Jerusalem. And it does have a alternate spelling that better reflects the way that it's pronounced. Yerushalayim. The reason I say that is because in this more recognizable spelling, arguably, the hirek under the mem at the end is pronounced before the mem, not after. So it's almost like a furtive hirek, which doesn't exist. So I'm just saying, when you see this, it's not Yerushalayim, right? It's Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim. Jerusalem. Next is the name of God. And I'm not going to tell you how to pronounce this. Scholars don't know with certainty how it was pronounced. This is in English translations sometimes translated Jehovah or Yahweh. But more often it's translated in all caps as Lord. And when this is pronounced while reading, it's typically pronounced Adonai, which means Lord. And it's pronounced Adonai in order to avoid mispronouncing God's name. So especially when you are with Hebrew speakers, especially when you're with Jewish people, you should, and you're reading aloud, you want to read this aloud as Adonai rather than as Yahweh, Jehovah, you know, or trying to pronounce it your own way. Next up is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim. I'll try to slow it down a little bit. Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim. This is the name of Egypt. Mitzrayim. Moshe. Moshe. This is the name Moses. Moshe. Melech. Melech. This is the word meaning king or ruler. Melech. Sus. This is the word meaning horse, male specifically. If it were a mare, a female horse, it would be Susa. Sus means horse. Eved. Eved. This is the word meaning slave or servant. And it's going to look, it looks very similar to a word you will learn later. The only difference is the concluding consonant. That dalet at the end is instead a different letter in the other word. So just be on the lookout for that. But for now, this is eved, and it means slave or servant. Paro. Paro. This is Pharaoh. Paro. Shana. Shana. This word means year. It's the word at the end of Rosh Hashanah, which means first of the year or head of the year. Shana means year. Shem, or if you're pronouncing it very quickly and you're not carefully enunciating, you might say Shem. Shem. This means name or reputation. Very often when Jewish people refer to God, they refer to him as Hashem, meaning the name. Shem. All right, so that's your vocabulary for this lecture. Now let me give you a little bit of advice on how to study, how to memorize the vocabulary and the nekudot, the dots, the vowels. Firstly, create and practice vocabulary flashcards. You can write them out using a marker and paper, or marker and note cards or something like that. Or you can create digital flashcards using something like Quizlet. That would be my recommendation, just because we are quickly transitioning into a day where there's very little actual writing done. And if you're going to be going into biblical studies where you need to type out Hebrew, it's going to be easier to do that if you've already learned how to type. And I do intend to do a typing lecture as part of the series at some point. But for now, if you want to use the flashcards that I have created for this lecture's vocabulary, you can find them at this URL, tinyurl.com/cdate-hebrew-vocab-1. That will redirect you to my Quizlet flashcard set on the vocabulary for this lecture. Make sure that you are, as quickly as possible, randomizing the order of those flashcards. So it's perfectly fine to memorize some or all of them in the order in which I've presented them, the alphabetical order. But if you've got physical flashcards, once you've memorized them in that order, shuffle them up and keep shuffling them up frequently, because you don't want to hinge your memory of the word on what comes before or what will come after it. And if it's digital ones, then as soon as possible, randomize the order in which the flashcard software presents them to you. Make sure that you practice both Hebrew to English and also English to Hebrew. I think a lot of people have a tendency to only practice looking at the Hebrew word and guessing what they remember the English translation to be. And that's fine, but it's not going to cement the word in your memory as well as if you're also practicing the other way around. So in the case of Adam, you will at first memorize Adam and that its meaning is humanity or human or humankind or Adam. But you'll also want to flip that over at times and in your flashcards come upon the word human, humanity, humankind, Adam, and be able to say, oh, that's Adam. All right. If you memorize it both ways, that's going to help you to memorize this vocabulary a lot better than if you only practice one way. Now, as for the nakudot, the dots, the pointings, again, create and practice flashcards. And again, you can do it manually with a pen and note cards or something like that, or as I would recommend, create digital ones. And if you don't want to learn how to type right now and you want to use the flashcard deck I have created for the nakudot, then you can use the ones on the URL, at the URL on the screen, tinyurl.com/cdate-nakudot. That flashcard set, incidentally, has the diphthongs in it as well. So as you're going through it, when you see the diphthongs, remember that your goal is not to say what the name of the diphthong is. There is no name of the diphthong, but rather to be able to recognize how it should be pronounced. And just as was the case with your vocabulary flashcards, make sure that you're frequently shuffling these or randomizing them so that you're not hinging your memory of one on what came before it. And again, practice both directions. From the Hebrew to the transliterated English, and from the transliterated English to the Hebrew. Or from the Hebrew to the sound, and then from the sound to the Hebrew, although the problem with that is that a lot of the sounds are the same and the difference is in the transliteration. So I would practice both from Hebrew to transliterated English and the other way around. If you're going through your flashcards, you should be able to see that an A with a line over the top of it, a horizontal line, is the long A-class vowel comments, whereas an A all by itself is the short A-class vowel patach. You want to be able to do that kind of thing. Like I encouraged you to do at the end of the first lecture, where we learned the consonants, make sure that you are practicing this standardized transliteration here. And now that you know the vowels, you can practice the consonants and vowels together. So don't go from unpointed or consonantal Hebrew to English transliterations now. Now transliterate from pointed Hebrew, from the Masoretic text. And you can find this all over the place for free online. I've given you one example on the slide, but it's super easy to find online. Just search for, you know, biblical Hebrew text, consonantal Hebrew text, you know, whatever, and you'll find examples of it. And like I said last time, in the last lecture, make sure that you were practicing your transliteration not just from Hebrew to English transliteration, but from English transliteration to Hebrew, to pointed Hebrew. And there's a number of ways you can do this, but I think the fastest and easiest way is just to take the transliteration that you produced when you were practicing transliteration from Hebrew, take the result, and then reverse transliterate it back into Hebrew. And then compare the original with what you've produced after this two-way process. And if you got it matched up, then you know you did it right. Last slide. It's at this point now that you can actually read, or at least verbalize, pointed Hebrew. And so now that you can do that, start reading it aloud, practicing reading aloud, and you don't even need to understand what you're saying. You do need to know that you're pronouncing it correctly, which isn't always going to be easy if you just have pointed Hebrew text in front of you and you're not yet familiar with the vowel sounds and everything. So one thing that would help you is to follow along in the pointed Hebrew as a fluent reader reads it aloud. You can search on YouTube for, reading Hebrew aloud or something like that, and you'll be able to find videos like these ones on your screen. So what I would do, and the benefit of doing it in YouTube is that you can slow it down to like half speed, and you can, and what you'll see on the screen is they'll show the text, and as they're speaking the text, they'll highlight the part that they're speaking, and that'll help you to make sure that you're pronouncing it correctly. So Practice reading aloud. Don't worry that you don't understand what's being said yet. The point here is to start to work toward being able to sight read aloud the pointed Hebrew. Because we're, as native English speakers, not used to seeing consonants and then vowel markings separately from them. And so we're sort of in this, it's going to take some time to develop the ability to smoothly read pointed Hebrew, and I want you to start to develop that ability now. Okay, so that's your homework, as it were, for next lecture, between now and next lecture. First of all, start memorizing your vocabulary. Remember to shuffle those flashcards and practice in both directions. Memorize your nekudot, your vowels, your shava, you know, all those, the diphthongs and everything. Memorize the sound that they make, how they are transliterated, and their names. Memorize all those things. And again, remember to shuffle up your flashcards. Remember to practice in both directions. Number 3, practice your transliteration. Now that you know vowels and not just consonants, transliterate your pointed Hebrew into transliterated English, and then reverse transliterate that back into Hebrew. And then finally, start practicing reading pointed Hebrew aloud, so that you start to develop the ability to sight read that and don't have to work on that as much later on. And with that, lahitkoot. I'll see you later. Bye-bye. I've been your host, Chris Date, and thanks so much for watching The Apologetics, where we think together through what we believe, why we believe it, and not something else. If you've enjoyed this episode, please click the thumbs up, like icon, the subscribe button, and the bell icon to receive notifications when new videos are streamed or uploaded. Either way, come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of The Apologetics, streaming live on YouTube every other Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific. Until then...